Hey, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory is due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from who do well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000 and the rest of the elect. Until I say shalom. Coming to you back with another Let's Do the Spirit. Now I'm entitled this one. This truth makes you a target. Because once you come into this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and you put off the world, you no longer be around your family members, friends that you had in the world, co-workers, maybe even cut some of them off, or you start speaking to them less. Stop going to the family barbecues, to the Thanksgiving dinners, the family gatherings, Christmas. You stop celebrating your birthdays. Now they see that you don't eat pork, shrimp, crab, lobster, whatever it may be, as abominable and unclean. You stop going to church with them. And pretty much, they start looking at you different, because now they see that, oh, damn, he thinks that he's better than us. He don't eat pork. He don't eat shrimp, crab, lobster. Or friends that you had in the world, he don't smoke anymore. He don't want to smoke with us. He don't want to hang with us. And ultimately what that does is put a target on your back. Now they start looking at you sideways. And even people, on a daily basis that you interact with, co-workers, people at the grocery store, people driving next to you, because they see the light, they see the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. And when you walk into a room, they notice you right away, and they don't know what it is, but really it's the spirit, and they can't pinpoint what it is, but we understand it is the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai dwelling in us. And that's why majority of the world, they can't accept that light, because that light shines that darkness upon these people in the world, family members, friends that you had in the world, co-workers, maybe even just somebody that you interacting with at running errands or something in that matter. And that light shines on their darkness. They're like, damn, they don't want to be around you. You irk, your presence irks them. They're like, damn. Ultimately, because the light of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. And once you come into this truth, you start getting attacked by demons. Demons hop on these people, to curse you out, to cut you off in traffic. But that's when we apply the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, because now we know, okay, damn, I got this target on my back, and these people may not even know it, but they got demons hopping on these people, to attack you. But that's what comes with serving Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. But also we have the armor, we have the tools to fight off these demons. And ultimately, as Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, putting on the whole armor. This is Isaiah 59 and verse 15. Your truth faileth, and he that departed from evil maketh himself a prey. And the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai saw it, and it displeased him that there was no judgment. And that's right. The real knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of how this world's supposed to be ran, this world's completely void of that. That's why majority of the world, they get offended. These Christians, the other Israelite camps, when you tell them about the truth, they can't accept it, because they're so used to this corrupted world being ran by wickedness, being ran by the so-called white man, being ran by these heathens, the women, Eve, over you, being subjects under everybody, and once we tell them how the world's really supposed to be ran, ultimately with the laws, statutes, commandments at the forefront, these people can't accept that, especially our people. Our people, the nation of Israel, the Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, they're the main ones who come against this truth. You reprove them, you rebuke them. You tell them to stop going off, to stop worshiping these false gods and these false idols. But what do our people do? They come against us the most. They talk shit. They scoff and mock, they make skits. Ultimately because Yahweh Bashim Yahushai didn't give them the spirit of understanding. So the majority of the world, they're not going to accept this truth because it wasn't given unto them. That's why when you turn away from this world, you arise and depart because you know that this world is wicked. It's about to be destroyed. That puts a target on your back. This is John chapter 15 and verse 18. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. So during the time of Yahweh Shai, when he was walking the earth, it was mainly his our people, the Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. They were coming up against Yahweh Shai. Especially those of the circumcision. Those they knew that there were Israelites. And it's the same thing today. It's those same spirits coming back today. That's why you have a lot of these other Israelite camps that are teaching false doctrine, coming up against the true men of the Lord, starting where apostles, elders, bishops on down of the great millstone, and the likewise camps that teach the likewise doctrine. Everybody comes up against us because of what we teach, the message we come with, very austere. The majority of the world, they can't receive that. These Christians come against us talking about y'all cuss a lot, y'all too rough around the edges. Because ultimately this message, this truth was only meant for the elect. And that's why majority of the world hates the prophets of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Verse 19, if you were of the world will love his own, but because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hated you. And really, majority of the world does hate us, except for the hopeful elect. But majority of the world, including our own people, these so-called white people, these Edomites and the rest of these heathens, especially these elite bank families, they hate us the most. That's why ultimately they devising a plan, to put hands on the men of the Lord. But we know when that happens, that standard is going to be lifted. But that stems from that deep hatred that these Edomites and our own people, because our own people, they're under that vibration of Esau, Edom. And who hates the nation of Israel the most? The Edomites. And our people, the wicked of our people, the 2/3, the none-elect, they come in that same spirit. That's why they can't receive this truth, and ultimately we know that puts a target on our back. Verse 20, remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they have kept my saying, they will keep yours also. And just like Yahweh Shai was persecuted, the 12 apostles, were persecuted as well. It's going to be the same thing. We're already being persecuted, on a low, I don't want to say on a low level, but, it hasn't fully popped up yet. You got our own people coming up against us. These anti-Hamashiachs, these Christians, these comedians, these celebrities. And then also the one that really wants to put us to death, Esau, Edom. He's going to be the main one that's going to try to do away with us, because ultimately Esau, Edom, he hates the nation of Israel. But really, we already know that the 2/3 are already going to be given up to this devil. But he's really trying to put hands on the elect, which we know he's not going to be successful because Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is going to keep his elect. He's going to keep the elect. For the most part, you are going to have martyrs. They're going to be, martyred for the testimony of Yahweh Shai, but they're going to be risen up first. But that's what comes with serving Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, is persecution, being hated, damn near from the whole world. Verse 21, but all these things will they do unto you for my name's sake, because they know not him that sent me. So majority of our people, even these Israelites that claim that they're in the truth, ultimately they're not really in the truth because they're not acknowledging Yahweh Shai. And a lot of them, they reject Yahweh Shai. And ultimately they're not rejecting You know, really they're rejecting Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, because a lot of them are like, oh yeah, I can go straight to the Heavenly Father. I don't need no mediator. But ultimately, these jakes, they're about to find out that you need Yahushai. You need the mediator. You need his blood to cover you, because when all hell breaks loose, majority of these jakes, they're going to remember, you know, they rejected Yahushai. You know, they rejected Paul. They rejected John the Baptist. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 20. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Had not Yahweh Bashim Yahushai made foolish the wisdom of this world? And, you know, majority of the people on the planet Earth, especially these Christians, you know, that went to these cemetery schools and even these other Israelite camps, you know, in their own eyes, they're wise, because they have all this knowledge. You know, they know all these breakdowns. And like the scripture says, you know, knowledge puffed up. So Yahweh Bashim Yahushai allowed them to get puffed up, and they think that they got it. You know, they think that, you know, they're going to be delivered by keeping the laws 100%. You know, but they're about to be made a fool. They're about to be made an example to the world, to what happens when those who think that they're wise in their own eyes. Verse 21, for that is the wisdom of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. The world by wisdom knew not the Most High. It pleased Yahweh Bashim Yahushai by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. So that's another reason why they hate the men of the Lord, the prophets, because we're out there on the highways and byways, you know, preaching the word week in and week out, putting up these electronical epistles, and the world hates that. They're like, nah, why do y'all push the word so hard? Y'all should just chill. You know, y'all should stop prophesying. You know, there's not going to be any Jacob's trouble, any martial law. That's what our people, you know, tell the prophets, because really they hate to see the prophets out there on the highways and byways, because deep in their spirit, you know, they know what it means. Ultimately, when the prophets are out there on the highways and byways, it means doom and gloom, but also salvation. You know, the majority of our people, they're not meant to receive it, because they scoff, they mock, they talk all this shit, you know, but yet they don't really know what the men of the Lord are out there for, ultimately to help seal the elect, but also to mark judgment. And really, majority of our people, you know, when they walk by the camp, when they you know, talk shit on the comment board, really they're just there to mark themselves. They're not there for the most part to be sealed, because they're part of the elect. So really, majority of our people, they're not meant to get it. That's why they were created, to just talk shit and mock and hate, you know, because Yahweh Bashim Yahushai don't want them to be delivered. This is Proverbs 29 and verse 27. An unjust man is an abomination to the just, and he that is upright in the way is abomination to the wicked. And our people hate, you know, the hopeful elect. They see the message we come with. You know, we tell them that they're going off, you know, that they're worshiping false gods and false idols. You know, we tell them to change their ways, to depart from the world, because it's about to be done away with. But what do our people? They're like, nah, man, don't stop telling me what to do. You know, like the scripture says, prophesy unto me smooth things. You know, don't tell me that America's going to be destroyed. You know, tell me that America's going to be healed. And when we tell them that that's not the case, you know, we tell them that this great destruction cometh, you know, they get mad, they talk shit, you know, they gnash at the teeth. This is 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 12. Yeah, and all that will live godly in Hamashiach Yahushua shall suffer persecution. So we're going to be persecuted. And we're already being persecuted, you know, in the sense that our people are coming up against us. You know, Esau, Edom, you know, the tiny hats. Because ultimately the message that we come with, you know, the message of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, the spirit, you know, of Yahushua, which is the spirit of prophecy. And they hate it, because we tell them that they're going down. You know, we tell our people that they're going to get put to death if they're not part of the elect. You know, and ultimately that cuts them cuts him in the spirit, cuts him in the heart, and really they want to put the prophets to death because they want to stop hearing, that trumpet being blown. They rather hear, these Christian pastors. They rather hear these other Israelite camps telling them lies and deceptions. That's why these other Israelite camps and these Christian pastors, in these whorehouses, they're really not hated. They're loved by their congregation. That's why they have thousands, tens of thousands of followers, hundreds of thousands of followers, because they come with a false message, with the message of really being false prophets. But Yahweh Bashmiel Shai set them up that way because like it's always been, the true prophets of Yahweh Bashmiel Shai have always been hated, especially by our own people. This is John chapter 3 and verse 19. And this is the condemnation, that light is coming in the world, and man loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. And ultimately that light, Yahweh Shai, the word. That's why we have this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding today. But even these Israelites that know that they're Israelites, they can't receive that light. They can't receive Yahweh Shai. That's why they scoff, they mock, they talk shit. They say that Paul fell off, that John the Baptist fell off. Verse 20, for everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. And that's majority of our people, especially those of the circumcision. They can't receive this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding because they weren't given the light, they weren't given the spirit. So majority of our people and these heathens, they're going to continue to hate, they're going to continue to talk shit until they get put to death. But that's pretty much the point. Praise, this is edifying to the elect. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from and who do well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000, the rest of the elect. Until I say Shalom.